Elden Ring. Oh, Elden Bing. What can I say about this game that has not already been said? Renowned as one of the best open-world games of all time, Elden Ring has developed a reputation for its incredible scale, boss fights, lore, and art style. But what about its horror? Yeah, I'm gonna continue to be that guy. Everything is a horror game. But genuinely, I do think that the horror elements in FromSoft games are often overlooked in favor of the other aspects that make these games great. And if you've peeked at the runtime of this video, Elden Ring is in no shortage of these horror elements. And quite honestly, I think Elden Ring uses these horror elements the best in the series, even better than Bloodborne. Whoa, buddy, let me explain. Let me plead my case. From body horror to gothic horror, into the ever-beloved cosmic horror, Elden Ring is an absolute buffet of terror and an absolute masterclass of contrast. This video will be the first in a series detailing the different styles of horror in Elden Ring, starting with the ever-gruesome body horror. So without further delay, get comfortable, grab some boiled prawn, some Sunny D, and your favorite Spooktober blanket as we delve into the horrors of Elden Ring with your hosts, Ramm and the Lamb. Viewer discretion is advised.
Foul tarnished, in search of the Elden. A tarnished cannot become a lord. Tarnished, not but a fool. A man cannot kill a god.
Body horror has been a staple of horror media and storytelling since its early folklore roots. Tales of men shedding their human skin and transforming into werebeasts. Tales of vampiric demons feasting on the blood of the living, sapping them of their lively essence. FromSoft is no stranger to these early roots of body horror, found within the Gothic literary tradition. Miyazaki's fascination with body horror is only rivaled by that of his thinly veiled feet, fascination. But FromSoft's obsession with body horror doesn't end at these early Gothic roots. From the pioneering work of David Cronenberg to the commercial hit Alien, body horror has been a staple of popular horror media for the past several decades. For the scope of this video, I only want to focus on one classic body horror movie, John Carpenter's The Thing.
12 men have just discovered something. For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live, inside, where no one can see it, or hear it, or feel it.
If you're unfamiliar with this masterpiece, go watch it. I'm not going to summarize it for you like you're my child during bedtime. Trust me, it's great and worth your time. The shining star of this legendary horror movie is the creature itself, that thing. An amalgamation of flesh attempting to mend itself into something comprehensible. Given enough time, the thing will look indistinguishable from any other life form we trust deeply. The family dog, your neighbor, the person you share a bed with. But in this liminal phase between its metamorphoses, it looks like a demonic symphony of flesh. Different parts of living matter mending into one, and even different species. If you played Elden Ring for more than 0.5 seconds, I think you know where I'm going with this. The Grafted Scion, or otherwise known as the Spider.
Jesus Christ!
This thing is pretty horrifying in appearance, but gets even more disturbing when you learn exactly what it is. The Grafted Scion resembles a writhing mass of limbs and bodies, formed by grafting together various parts of humans, creatures such as trolls, and even animals. Each limb and each arm protruding from its body speaks of lives once lived, now silenced. Their will subsumed into the creature's form. If this wasn't disturbing enough, closer inspection of this thing reveals the host of this mass of flesh. Zuli the Witch made an excellent video detailing what looks like a noble child serving as the host to all these grafted limbs. The child appears pale and sickly. Why would someone do this to a child? Well, I think that bears a more important question. Where do these spiders come from, and how are they being made? Okay, usually this is the part in these types of videos where we go into the lore and all that nerdy shit. But there's a bit of a problem with that. I, unlike you, bow tarnished, aren't a maidenless virgin, and therefore do not read.
I love books.
Books are for
Winners.
No. Go
Read a novel.
So, I can't be bothered to dig through item descriptions to figure out why exactly this dude's name is the loathsome shit eater. I mean, he seems like a pretty sensible guy to me. So, for the scope of this video, I will only bring up lore when I believe it is relevant and enhances the horror experience of encountering these creatures. I also might get some of the lore wrong, because again, I like critical reading comprehension. But half of the fun in these games is trying to speculate through the ambiguity, so if I contradict the old great keeper of the lore, I will happily face my judgment. With that being said, I do want to talk about a girl you meet outside of Stormveil Castle, where the spider resides. A girl who unintentionally aided in their creation. Her name is Godrick.
Everyone's been grafted. Everyone who came with me. They crossed the sea for me. They fought for me. Only to have their arms taken. Their legs taken. Even their heads taken. Taken and stuck to the spider. Did you know, if you're grafted by the spider, you become a chrysalid? It's quite a lark when you think about it.
Godrick's men were killed and mutilated in order to be grafted onto the spider. It's ambiguous whether these soldiers went willingly or were murdered, but I enjoy both interpretations. If they were murdered after attempting to enter Stormveil Castle, or pass through to Liurnia, which is on the other side of the castle, then it is a classic creature's lair archetype. Get too close to the creature's lair and you will be dragged in to become its next victim. But for a second, let's consider the possibility that these men went willingly into the embrace of the spider. Godrick guesses that the reason you, the player, are going to Stormveil alone with your pathetic +1 sword, underleveled, swagless, talentless, maidenless, is because you've given up on the whole Elden Lord thing, and have chosen to become one with the spider.
You're all on your own, are you? And heading to Stormveil Castle? Well, you've come to be one with the spider? Well, that makes us two peas in a pod. But I don't have your courage. It's scary, you know, having your arms cut off, or legs, or your head. I want to be like everyone else, but I'm just too scared. I'm nothing but a craven.
Her expressing how she is the one who actually desires to give herself up to the spider, but is too afraid to get mutilated, has always disturbed me. It could be she's suffering from shock and survivor's guilt from leading her men to a horrible fate. And given how much detail she recalled about how their limbs and even their heads were taken, makes me believe she witnessed it all firsthand. So perhaps this survivor's guilt is pushing her to join her men in their fate. But it could also be that in this kingdom, it is normal to give your body up to the elite nobles to consume. The ultimate tax, if you will. Not much different from our modern circumstances, is it? Either way, the nature of the grafting is not too clear to me, but both possibilities are pretty horrifying. I tend to lean on thinking that Godrick is suffering from shock and delusions in an attempt to cope with the horrifying events she witnessed. A big reason I believe that is actually what she requests you to do for her.
Oh, can you pass on a message for me? If you see the little chrysalids in Stormveil Castle, tell them I love them, and that, despite my craven heart, I'm sure I'll be joining their club soon enough.
if you didn't know, a chrysalid is actually the pupa of butterflies and moths they use to complete their metamorphosis. Oh, you knew that already? Yeah, of course you did, nerd. But it is a bit of a strange request to deliver a message to a bunch of pupas. But I mean, this is Elden Ring. Maybe her men turn into beautiful butterflies or something. Yeah, that's what I thought. In her shock and through the many coping mechanisms she has probably gone through, Rodriga has convinced herself of a delusion. Instead of accepting the fact that her men are most certainly dead and are disposed of in tightly wrapped body bags, Rodriga sees these body bags and convinces herself they're cocoons. It's almost childlike the way she envisions this fantasy to cope with the reality that she inadvertently led her men to a horrible, horrible fate. And surely enough, as you venture into Stormvale and reach the large dining hall of the castle, you are met face to face with the results of these horrific murders. The horror of the Scion. After defeating the abomination, you might take a second to look around the dining hall and look at all the limbs and bodies hung around. Well, there was only one Scion in here. Why are they seemingly storing so many limbs? Are they grafting an army of Scions? Or maybe a giant Scion? Yep, that's exactly it. It's a giant Scion. But this one speaks.
Well,
Plain as a lord. I command thee. I am the lord of all that is golden.
Godrick is such an awesome boss design. Instead of resembling a spider like the Scions, I would say Godrick more closely resembles
A giant tarantula on its hind legs coming right at you!
He is grotesque. Having grafted the limbs of many people and creatures much stronger than he, his head is so disproportionately small compared to the limbs, he looks like those juiced up bodybuilders that look like they're little aliens piloting a mech. It's very clear Godrick has taken some performance enhancing measures, namely grafting, and if you're still confused on what grafting is, you're about to get a live demonstration.
Truest of dragons. Lend me thy strength.
Godrick is the epitome of pathetic strength, unearned and unhoned. He is also the epitome of body horror. He has so many grafted limbs it's difficult to even tell where Godrick begins and ends. He's like a walking ship of Theseus, and taking off his robe does not help in the slightest. If anything, it makes me want to hurl. I think it's no mistake that the cloak Godrick wears hides the most disturbing parts of his mask. The cloak represents his opulent facade. He claims the Tarnished is role-playing as a lord, but in reality, he is the LARPer. He's just projecting his own insecurity. Godrick's forefather was a man of legend and great esteem, hailed for his strength and prowess. Godrick is anything but. He is weak. The power he holds now was only the result of opportunistic selfishness, manipulating his way into power by sneaking into this abandoned castle during a war and declaring himself lord. And yes, that's actually canon. This man literally used the mimic veil to become a femboy and hide among the women escaping Lionel during the Shattering War so he can hide in Stormveil Castle from Radahn, who was coming to clap his great cheeks. Elden Ring lore is truly Miyazaki's magnum opus. But moving on, Godrick figuratively tries to veil his weakness behind his golden bloodline and title. Furthermore, he literally tries to cloak his physical weakness behind the strength of others. And to top off the layers of concealment, he cloaks his deformity with an opulent robe. Man, the designers did an excellent job creating a horrifyingly complex yet cohesive monument to body horror. But the body horror does not end with Godrick. Miyazaki has grown tired of scanning the feed of young impressionable models to include in his games. Oops, wrong Japanese dev. Miyazaki has moved on to more refined and mature taste. Granny hands.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here. Where are your fingers?
Your fingers, please, your fingers.
Elden Ring is completely obsessed with the distant siblings of feet, hands. And while we will look at some of these examples a bit more in depth later in this series, in regards to body horror, I want to give an honorable mention to these abominations. I hate these things. I hate them. I don't have arachnophobia, okay? I let house spiders chill in my room rent-free because they make excellent roommates. My current roommate is a fella named Toby who lives behind a poster I got hung up. So I'm down with spiders. But these things, hell no. Burn them with holy fire. These things cling to the wall like giant tarantulas. They swarm you like a pack of killer spiders. They lie in trap to devour you like trapdoor spiders. No. Just no. And they levitate like Thing from the Addams Family. Okay, actually that's pretty sick, not gonna lie. Getting caught by one of these feels like getting caught by those jump scare candy bows they used to have for Halloween. Absolute nightmare fuel. But I digress. The origin of these finger creepers was highly debated among the great lore scholars of our age. But alas, the speculation was for naught, as a true great keeper of the lore quelled our thirst for the truth in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. But it was more bizarre and horrifying than we could have imagined. But we're not at that part of the series yet. You're gonna have to wait a couple weeks or months for me to talk about that thing. Have patience, foul tarnished. But before the DLC came out, it was speculated that Rykard was the source of the finger creepers, since they were said to have been born of blasphemy. And well, there's only one obvious suspect in that regard before the DLC came out. If you also take a closer look at Rykard's hands, they closely resemble the decayed hands of the finger creepers. And actually, now that we're talking about this snake boy, this is as good a time as ever to mention the horrors found at Volcano Manor. The road to Volcano Manor is one of my favorite areas in the game. After scaling Mount Gilmere, the fairly linear road you've been following begins to take a very disturbing turn. The place is a complete desolate wasteland, ravaged by what looks to have been a complete massacre. The remnants of the armed forces still holding their posts long after the war finished, even resorting to cannibalism to survive their new bleak reality. This place is hellish and reminds me of No Man's Land from World War I footage. To add to this bleak atmosphere, the enemies you find here share that hellish characteristic and are horrifying. No, not you guys again! But one enemy in particular I want to focus on is the Iron Maidens, or otherwise known as the Abductor Virgins. These enemies are a hybrid of the Corpse Snatchers from Bloodborne, and the Iron Maiden torture devices speculated to have been used by medieval Europeans as a form of torture and execution. My favorite aspect of the Iron Maiden's design is its personification as an uncanny female figure, or more specifically, a motherly figure. Being put into an Iron Maiden is almost like a reverse birth. You return into a twisted and perverted form of your mother, and instead of gifting you life, your life is taken away. The abductor virgins run with this design principle of a motherly figure, as we see the upper half of its mechanical shell sculpted to be holding a baby. But much like the Iron Maidens, this image of a nurturing mother is perverted within the abductors. As their name suggests, they are not designed to give life, but rather, they are designed to steal life. When these creatures abduct you, you get a peek into their inner organs. Blood mist fills their abdominal cavity, and what you may have previously believed to be a machine is quickly revealed to have flayed flesh pinned on the outside of its metal exterior. This thing is alive somehow. It is designed to gnash at the flesh of its victim and inflict great pain before abducting them. Designed by a literal torturer, these things are cursed to obey its depraved directive as a flesh automaton. But why is it trying to abduct you? Where is it trying to take you? Well, I think there's only one way to find out. Volcano Manor. A place of great despair and grim deeds, and an unspeakable evil lying beneath its foundations. There is much history to this place that lies outside of the scope of this video. So instead of focusing on what is on the surface, I would rather investigate the seedy underbelly of this manor. Let's take a peek into the chambers the owners would rather we not see. In the dark corners of this accursed place, you can come across a locked building which may pique your interest. Not being one to be deterred by a measly lock and a sign saying, "Stay out! You really don't want to know what's happening in here." You scale the roof of the building and find a window to enter from. As you peer through the opening, you notice the room is pitch black. You equip your trusty lantern and take the plunge. What you find in this structure is nothing short of a torturer's playground. You would be forgiven if at first you thought these enemies were just ravenous ghouls or reanimated corpses, but it quickly becomes clear that they are victims of horrendous torture and experimentation. Driven to madness, they claw at anyone and anything to free them. These people have been forced into contraptions which contort and destroy their bodies. Starved to be malnourished and weak, their bodies as well as their minds are under constant pain and cruel torture. They are forced to wear these hoods which have a magical property that magnifies the pain and fear of those who are forced to wear it. It's clear that whoever is torturing these poor bastards has no intel or information to gain. The torturers are not seeking answers, but rather they are seeking to inflict as much suffering into their victims as possible. This whole area of Volcano Manor reminds me a lot of the research hall from Bloodborne, where horrific experiments and borderline torture took place as well. And I think the resemblance is pretty clear. Besides the similar enemies, the vibe is generally similar. Hearing the anguished cries of all these victims whose bodies have been corrupted beyond repair is unsettling and heartbreaking all the same. Especially when you discover this is not the only persecution this race of people have faced in this land. These guys really can't catch a break.
Another day, another...
Oh God! Please! Please make it stop!
But that's a topic for another day. Let's continue our descent into Volcano Manor by paying old Snake Boy another visit.
Very well. Showing myself and King as remedy. Together! Now you'll devour the very god.
Rykard is just plain awesome. You're gonna hear me say that a lot throughout this video series. The build up to this boss is excellent, with you hearing of an unkillable serpent devouring people by the hundreds. Rykard, the lord of this manor, has given in to this serpent seduction, and was devoured by it in an act of blasphemy. Some say that this wretched serpent would grow strong enough to devour the very gods, and perhaps the world. To combat this world-ending threat, a group of Rykard's former allies rebel against his decision to give in to the serpent, and instead aim to kill it. Many failed in this endeavor as they quickly realized no mortal weapon can ever pierce the beast's hide, let alone kill it. So they desperately searched for a weapon that could, and eventually they managed to find it. The Serpent Hunter, designed to kill the unkillable. But even this discovery was not enough to lead them to victory. The men charged with the serpent killer in hand, but fell all the same in the embrace of the devouring serpent. Now it's up to the next champion to test their might and either bring down the immortal serpent or join the mass of corpses in its lair. What a build-up. Elden Ring excels at creating tension and atmosphere around a boss that gives the confrontation more weight and rises the stakes greatly. I love how when you first enter the Serpent's chamber, it's just laying there curled up in a ball, probably feeding on the last champion who tried to kill it. It being curled up conceals the true scale of its form, but also makes you feel like you're trespassing on its home. And speaking of its home, the mounds and pillars of corpses visible in this arena are just sick. These body pillars are a motif that FromSoft loves to include when they use body horror, and one that I'm a particularly huge fan of. But once you walk forward into this lair, you see a decrepit corpse holding the Serpent Slayer for you. As if in his final moments he knew there was no winning this battle, and sacrificed his life to aid the next champion who would dare challenge the Serpent. And unfortunately for him, that next challenger would be you, foul, maidenless, tarnished. But beggars can't be choosers, so you take the Serpent Hunter from its rotted sheath and get to work. Wow, good job, Tarnished. Maybe you aren't so useless after all. Oh, well, shit.
It's supposed to be a fucking RPG. What role am I playing? The fucking victim?
Rykard's design kind of reminds me of when George Lopez was in Spy Kids. Wait, hear me out. Rykard's face is incredibly uncanny, just bizarre and out of place on the underbelly of the serpent. It really feels unnatural and doesn't belong. And in a good way, not a George Lopez way. I honestly don't even know what's going on here. Did we kill the serpent? And is Rykard now taking control? Was he always in control? Bro looks like he just woke up from a devious evening nap. Is the serpent giving him control out of desperation? I don't know, nor do I care to know, honestly, because the ambiguity is what makes it so unsettling. But what's not ambiguous is how Rykard would like you to join his serpent family.
This is an automated reminder to join the Serpent King's family and subscribe, and together we will devour the very YouTube gods.
And by the way, if you're still not convinced that Rykard has a horror-influenced design, this is what he would look like if he stood up straight and showed his true form. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Another part of Rykard's design that incorporates body horror is similar to Godrick's grafting, with the many arms of the people he's consumed protruding from his body and his sword. The visual metaphor of consumption is present throughout Elden Ring, and to me not only represents a literal consumption, but also a consumption of ideology and purpose. When Rykard invites you to join the serpent as family and together devour the gods, he doesn't just mean for you to join him literally, but also figuratively, giving up your will for the will of the collective serpent family. And really that is at the center of Elden Ring's conflict. Whose ideology will you subscribe to? Whose way is best? On one side of the aisle, you have those who acknowledge the current system is broken and want to fix it. Others want to ditch the system entirely and bring about a new age, independent of outer influence. And some just want to watch the world burn. Oh, and others are completely content on eating shit for all eternity. You know what? Let's talk about this chonky boy for a second. The loathsome dung eater. This guy is a literal serial killer, except kinda worse because he's a cochino. You hear rumors from other characters in the game about how vile and evil this man is, killing and defiling people at random for seemingly random reasons. And eventually he shows up to the Round Table Hold, a neutral and peaceful common gathering space for Tarnished to cooperate. And needless to say, his neighbors are not very pleased with the sounds and the smells coming from his room.
And a little while ago, someone started lurking in the wing on the opposite side of the round table. And I can hear, from all the way over there, the howling and wailing of spirits in fear of a curse. I can even hear the repulsive twisted malice in itself. A plethora of spirits in an unceasing cacophony. I can't even imagine how much suffering inflicted to who knows how many souls. Not even the grafting caused anything like this to happen.
But I mean, how bad could this guy be? I mean, his name is literally the loathsome dung eater. That's like the funniest shit in this entire game. But one look at his handiwork and it becomes pretty clear why this monster is so feared. In Lionel, the largest city in the game, we can find one of many victims of the dung eater, strapped to a chair with a bloody cloth on his lap. Now, at first this might not seem too bad, but fortunately, or unfortunately, Zuli the Witch popularized a really solid theory on how the dung eater defiles his victims. To quote Zuli, "At first, dung eater seems like a strange, almost comical title, but it may give insight into the nature of this defilement. In some Japanese folklore, the soul is housed in a spherical organ called the Shirikodama, which is stored where the sun don't shine. The Shirikodama was the target of certain malicious spirits, who by taking it would steal your soul. Match that up with the way we find dung eater's victims, and I think we can see where Zuli is going with this theory. Pretty disturbing stuff indeed. Thankfully for us, the loathsome booty eater is locked away in the sewers under Lionel after presumably being caught defiling the victim we discussed earlier. But don't be too concerned for the well-being of our disgusting Hannibal Lecter friend. Given how chunky the dung eater is, thick boy must be eating well down here in the sewers. Actually, I forgot to mention one little detail. Just because he's locked down here doesn't mean he's no longer a threat to society. He can actually eat your ass in spirit form. Yeah, I would not feel safe sleeping on my stomach at night in the lands between. So maybe you should let him out of the sewers to finally put an end to this cheek-devouring threat. But be careful, he might try to get you to join his cause.
What's going on, bro?
What's up?
What's on your mind?
What do you think about all the ass out here? Do you eat it?
What?
I eat ass. You eat ass? Look at that ass. Don't you just want to eat it? Come eat ass with me tonight.
But believe it or not, getting your ass eaten is not the worst fate to befall the poor inhabitants of the lands between. There are much worse things that can be done to the human body. Let's start with the Midsommer village. In a village nestled to the north of Atlas Plateau, there is a festival going on. But you know, the last time I was invited to a festival around here expecting to dance, eat, and drink, I was sorely disappointed.
What? What?
But I've got a good feeling about this one. Just look at how beautiful the scenery is. Oh, and they already started the dancing. It's about time I get to tear this dance floor up.
What the fuck did I do wrong? Tell me!
This is the second most tragic rejection of my life.
Want my professional opinion? Just do what Vike did and seduce a dragon. I've heard that Lansay Axe is currently single and delivers a positively electrifying experience. Let me know how it goes.
In this village, a dark and terrible fate fell upon the men who once lived here. Their bodies lay charred in a funeral pyre, their bones used to craft the barbaric weapons the women of the village use. A spirit doomed to relive his last moments gives us a window into what happened here in the past.
I hear a festive melody.
No, don't skin me. My hide is filthy, I swear. But how long ago did they kill all their men? Well, according to the description of their festival clothing, they are only permitted to be worn by young maidens, aka unmarried or virgin girls, partaking in the festival. Well, I'm no expert in young maidens, surprising I know given the current track record of my fellow YouTubers, but I can't say these women's appearance screams young fair maiden to me. Although it definitely screams insane femcel, so I guess the unmarried part checks out. With faces like these, supposedly belonging to young women, this festival clearly has been going on for a very, very long time. This theory is also supported by how faded and worn their festival garments are. It's clear to me that these women have been dancing maniacally here for years, if not decades, non-stop. This festival reminds me of the dancing plague of 1518. Where allegedly a woman in modern-day France began dancing in the street for days, infecting others in the village with her mania as they joined her in a never-ending dance. Lasting for a whole week non-stop, it is suspected that some may have even died due to this dancing plague. This whole area also reminds me a lot of the movie Midsommer, for obvious reasons. But even besides the clear visual similarities, I think the sex relations role reversal is also a parallel I find striking between the two. Another similarity is the body horror used by the cults in both pieces of media. Both groups of killers using the bodies of their victims as sacred tools and shrines in their religious practices. I wouldn't be surprised if Miyazaki was down with a little bit of Ari Aster madness. But this Midsommer village is not the only village in Elden Ring that holds a dark and gruesome secret. And quite honestly, I think this next one is the very worst of all the body horror we've discussed so far. Bonny Village, a place of great pain, suffering, and persecution. On the outskirts of the village, you may come across a small location with a cruelly direct name, the Whipping Hut. Here you'll find a spirit who will make it even more obvious what the cruel purpose of this hut was.
For pity's sake, your place is in the jar. Nigh, sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life will you accorded for this alone.
The spirit presumably stood over a shaman as he mercilessly whipped them and said these dehumanizing words. Conventional whipping is cruel enough, but the spirit's weapon of choice just makes the whole thing much worse. The Tooth Whip. Yeah, I'll just let the item description speak for itself. Whip bestrewn with rotten, misshapen teeth, filthy and seething with disease. The teeth are embedded in the whip. As the wounds ripen, they grow inflamed and ooze pus. The flesh of shamans was said to mend harmoniously with others. Excuse me? What do you mean their flesh would mend with others? Were they whipping these shamans to the point of their skin being flayed and then stuffing them into jars? Well, if we follow the road down to Bonny Village, we can see the aftermath of these cruel practices. Jars upon jars upon jars. This village is a mass burial of the condemned shamans, some of them even being hung up in their round coffins. And it is in this accursed village that we run into their oppressors, mad men who are as much clothed as they are sane. Bonny Village alone paints a dark and horrifying picture in our imagination of the torture that took place here. But Miyazaki was not satisfied with imagination alone. This is Elden Ring we're talking about. We can't go this long without some more body horror, can we?
Oh, please, stop the jar. Anything but that. I promise I won't ever do it again. I swear, a living saint I'll surely be. Please, you must forgive me. Forgive me, please.
Bonny Jail, where the true horrors of the shaman's torture lie. In this prison frozen over, we will find what remains of the shamans, the living jar innards. Wait a second. Is this what's inside my pot, friends? These monstrosities, a product of horrible torture? No, don't ruin this for me, Miyazaki. This is all I had to comfort me in this house of horrors you call a game. What's wrong with you, you sick and disturbed little man? Yeah, I'm honestly still recovering from this one since I played Shadow of the Erdtree. Like, even if these aren't necessarily the same pots as the ones we find in the base game, one, I call bullshit on that because we can literally find living jars in some of these jails, so they're not that separated from each other. And two, even if they are somewhat distinct, their existence still has a horrible origin. And who's to say one of the pot boys hasn't stayed true to its roots and put a living person in itself instead of human remains? Yeah, no. I'm busting America and rewriting this cruel world. If it was up to me, this is what would be in the jars. Regardless, this is a cruel, cruel fate that befell the persecuted shamans. I can't even imagine the excruciating pain they would have endured being whipped by sharpened teeth, which probably belonged to other members of their shaman village. They would be whipped until their skin was flayed and infected, and then forced and stuffed into these jars with other people they probably knew very closely. And it's one thing to die from such a fate, but they have been alive and preserved in this glorified meat locker for God knows how long. So long, in fact, that the shamans have fed on the maggots growing from their own flesh to survive. It is no wonder they have gone mad and attack anyone who draws near. The living jar innards design provokes a perversion of martyr imagery. Bound and blindfolded, this is what a martyr looks like before their triumph over evil. No glory and no pride just yet. Before a martyr's ascent into sainthood, it is not a pretty sight. It is only until their commitment to good is rewarded that they are freed from the horrors they were subjected to and ascend to sainthood. The living jar innards were stuffed into these jars by their oppressors with the goal of producing saints. The only problem with that is you can't use evil to produce anything that's good. That's like trying to cook a steak in a microwave. The results speak for themselves. The shaman's brutal demise at the hands of evil men did not grant them the crowns or wings of sainthood, but rather they were given broken and malformed flesh. They are marked with the anguished faces of their kin as testament to their continued suffering. Any attempts to help these poor souls has been for naught. A torturous fate, to say the least, and one that produced perhaps the most disturbing use of body horror in Elden Ring. Honestly, there was a lot more body horror than I was anticipating in this game. There are a lot more examples that I will be touching on in the following videos in this series. These were just examples where I thought body horror was at the front and center of the terror. This is certainly not the last we'll see of horrific abominations. Thank you, dear viewer, for entertaining the ravings of a madman once again. In the next video, we will be diving into the gothic horror of Elden Ring. Until next time, dear viewers, I will see you in your dreams.
I'll see you.